In the meantime, I want to bring in retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey and Daily Beast columnist and foreign policy expert David Rothkopf. So, General, your initial reaction to this fragile deal, what do you see?
Well, I think it's very, very good news. The most important aspect is the 24-hour immediate ceasefire to stop the fighting, stop the artillery, the air attacks, the occasional missile attacks by Hamas on Israel. That's vital. And then the second aspect, of course, is getting all the hostages back, both alive and dead, hopefully within the 72 following hours. If that happens, Anna, I would assume the incentives to stay at peace will be enormous. I think the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are exhausted. The country is sick of fighting, and Hamas has been absolutely nearly obliterated. And the Gaza people, 2 million Palestinians, are in abject misery. So I think if we get through the next 72 hours, then we may well see an enduring ceasefire, not a peace. In the phase 2 discussions, I would be amazed if Hamas agrees to disarm and leave to a technocrat government, and I'd be amazed if the Israelis would accept anything but a neutral peacekeeping force in Gaza.
David, what are your biggest unanswered questions, or what is your top question about this deal?
Well, I think General McCaffrey began to outline those things. Phase 1 was very difficult. We should stop. We should be grateful that they've gotten to phase 1. There are benefits for Israelis and Palestinians alike and for the region that come out of it. But the big questions: how do you rebuild the Palestinian territories? Who pays for the rebuilding? Who is governing the Palestinian territories in the interim? Can the Netanyahu administration move away from its resistance to the idea of an independent Palestinian state? What happens in the West Bank, where they have been quite aggressive, and these issues are linked with regard to the Palestinian state? What does rebuilding look like? Will the Israelis move away from the idea of ethnic cleansing in the Palestinian territories? Who possibly might govern the Palestinians on behalf of the Palestinians? These are massive questions, many of which have been lingering for a long, long time. We should be grateful for the ceasefire. We should be cautious about referring to it as a peace agreement.
It is a long road, as you both have outlined. General, we are told all living hostages will be released at one time, and that would be huge. But we don't even know if Hamas knows where they all are. And when it comes to the deceased hostages, their bodies could be buried under rubble. Could this all still go wrong? How challenging is implementation of just this first phase?
Well, I think there'll be every incentive on the part of Hamas to try and find the majority of these hostages in the first fell swoop. Certainly, the crucial piece of it, of course, is the 20 hostages who are alleged to be still alive. That remains to be determined. But again, I think this is so vital that if the hostages are returned, let's say in the next week, to include those who are deceased, it will take away the political energy for the Netanyahu government to continue fighting. And Hamas obviously is on the ropes. They have been devastated by the IDF, who also, by the way, are exhausted and have taken significant casualties. But I think if we can get into this initial ceasefire, get the hostages back, flood the zone with humanitarian aid, and end the constant bombardment of occupied areas with civilian populations, we should expect, in my view, in the near term, an enduring ceasefire. But as David says, this is not peace. This is the absence of war.
Israel has said eliminating Hamas was their goal all along. David, at this point, Hamas hasn't agreed to put down arms or to give up governance of Gaza. Do you see Hamas eventually giving that up? And even if they do you see Israel giving these Hamas leaders who remain a free pass out of Gaza?
Well, these are big questions. There's plenty of reason for Hamas to resist, but Hamas is much weakened. I think as big a question is, were Hamas to exit the stage, who would replace them, who would do that would be acceptable to the Israelis, to the various factions within the Palestinian territories, within the region. And there is another factor here, and that is that there's an election coming up in Israel. And one of the reasons many people think that the Prime Minister Netanyahu has been waging this war is to divert from his own political fortunes. As the elections come up, the question is going to be, how does he respond to that? How do the right-wing factions in Israel respond to that? What new pressures will be on him? So, you know, it's going to be walking on eggshells for some time to come. But for the moment, let's be grateful for what the Trump administration, the Netanyahu administration, all the regional powers have done to get us this far.
And I think a lot of people are also really watching what happens in Gaza and whether the aid will come flooding in. General, Israel has agreed to move troops back, but not out of Gaza entirely. So how far will Israeli troops pull back and how quickly can they be mobilized?
Well, the so-called yellow line will leave them in control of a little more than 50% of Gaza. Again, to sort of echo David's point, I think the likelihood of Hamas disarming, of leaving the zone, of finding a technocratic government that would emerge from what the West Bank and Gaza seemed pretty remote in the near term. What could be a vital change in the landscape is if they can create a peacekeeping force to occupy the Gaza zone, perhaps even the West Bank also. It would be difficult for the Israelis to accept that, but one can imagine that with Saudi money and Egyptian or Jordanian manpower, Turkey, Qatar, it's possible to get a neutral peacekeeping force perhaps in the coming months. But focus on the ceasefire, the end of the immediate suffering, and massive input of humanitarian aid, medical, food, water, some shelter into Gaza to relieve the suffering there.
General Barry McCaffrey and David Rothkopf, thank you both.